Democrats and paragon of left liberal values, Elisa Slotkin, gave the response to the State of the Union address, the official response. So I am betting a lot of people in our audience are fans of a little film called Dr. Strangelove. Now, Dr. Strangelove, maybe the most memorable character, certainly one of them, is General Jack Ripper, who is obsessed with putting a stop to the communist plot to impurify our natural bodily fluids. Now, this movie came out in 1964, and at that time, the chief of staff of the Air Force was a pretty infamous war hawk named Curtis LeMay, who you can see with the cigar there. At that time, any viewer would have understood that's who they were referring to. If LeMay had had his way during the Bay of Pigs crisis, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, we probably would have had a nuclear war. He wanted to bomb Cuba even after the Russians agreed to withdraw. He was just a screwball. Went on in 1968 to run as the vice presidential candidate with George Wallace, the segregationist candidate challenging Nixon. All of that to say, at the time that they made Dr. Strangelove, there was no question what side of the political aisle this kind of rabid Russophobia warmongering would have been coming from. Anybody would have understood this was Curtis LeMay. Curtis LeMay is obviously a right-wing lunatic, but oh, how times have changed. Oh, how times have changed. So this is Elisa Slotkin doing her best impression of General Jack Ripper in her response to Donald Trump's speech.
President Trump loves to say peace through strength. That's actually a line he stole from Ronald Reagan. But let me tell you, after the spectacle that just took place in the Oval Office last week, Reagan must be rolling in his grave. We all want an end to the war in Ukraine, but Reagan understood that true strength required America to combine our military and economic might with moral clarity. And that scene in the Oval Office wasn't just a bad episode of reality TV. It summed up Trump's whole approach to the world. He believes in cozying up to dictators like Vladimir Putin and kicking our friends like the Canadians in the teeth. He sees American leadership as merely a series of real estate transactions. As a Cold War kid, I'm thankful it was Reagan and not Trump in office in the 1980s. Trump would have lost us the Cold War. Donald Trump's actions suggest that in his heart, he doesn't believe we're an exceptional nation. He clearly doesn't think we should lead the world. Look, America is not perfect, but I stand with the majority of Americans who believe we are still exceptional, unparalleled. And I would rather have American leadership over Chinese or Russian leadership any day of the week. Because for generations, America has offered something better. Our security and our prosperity, yes, but our democracy, our very system of government, has been the aspiration of the world. And right now, it's at risk.
The communists are impurifying our natural bodily fluids.
Yes.
So at the time that they made Dr. Strangelove, I don't think they used the term deep state yet, but they had the concept that you had these shadowy right-wing figures controlling the government who were going to get us all into nuclear war. So it's fascinating seeing this very liberal, kind of very put together, urban, sophisticated version of what's essentially she's doing. She stole General Jack Ripper's act, or in real life, Curtis LeMay's act. So here's Power to the People. He releases some bangers on the regular. You should follow him. Elisa Slotkin is a former CIA agent who was endorsed by Liz Cheney and worked in the Bush White House. She responded to Trump's joint address by praising Ronald Reagan. This is who the Democrats chose to represent their party. They don't oppose Republicans. They are Republicans. Now, this is, in many ways, Elisa Slotkin has made flesh the argument that when you keep choosing the lesser of two evils, you just keep moving the system further and further to the right. Because clearly, this is how the Democrats want to represent themselves. even in the wake of the drubbing that they just took. Why? Because this is what they consider a left position, what is traditionally a Republican neocon position. They have become the Republican Party. I mean, that's not a fanciful idea. They are Bush era Republicans.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you could swap out specifics, obviously, but in tone and in intent, that is exactly the kind of speech you'd hear a Republican give about the Democrats circa
Absolutely.
2003 to 2005, 6.
Absolutely.
Yeah, not at all different.
No, it's really amazing watching a political party and people who subscribe to it for whom McCarthyism and the specter of McCarthyism is kind of foundational to liberals and leftists alike, and to see them just so oblivious to the fact that they have become the red baiting McCarthyites. It's been one of the most remarkable spectacles of my lifetime in politics, watching these people all embrace Russophobia. Professor Zinkus, our friend there, in the Democratic response to Trump's speech, Elisa Slotkin praised Ronald Reagan. Reagan, who more than doubled military budgets while slashing social services, causing a decline in median family income and record increases in poverty. That Reagan. This is your resistance? Well said. Glenn Greenwald. They only chose Slotkin because it would have looked weird to choose Liz Cheney. But that's basically what they got. Cheney, of course, not only endorsed Slotkin, but actively campaigned for her precisely because, like most Dems now, she embraces the Bush-Cheney foreign policy. Mike Benz, this person loudly insinuating Doge will spy on people, worked for a little old spy agency famous for behaving responsibly. You may have heard of it. So here, underlining her bio, former CIA agent. Now, we have our issues with Doge. We've explored them. We'll be exploring them more in this episode. But if you want to make a case against Doge on privacy grounds, yes, you probably should not get the former CIA agent out there to make that case for you.
They should have just gotten an actual current and active CIA agent to do the rebuttal. Just black out their face and alter their voice. Just do one of those jobs. President Ronald Reagan would be rolling over in his grave. Yeah,
I was choreographing a transgender dance troupe in Bangladesh when the funding cuts came.
Yeah,
they worked so hard. It was so sad when I had to tell them the show was off.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is something I actually stumbled on during my research for this piece. I didn't even remember this. She literally, word for word, I don't know that she intentionally referenced this, but Obama, word for word, used the words Reagan would roll over in his grave, horrified that so many Republicans approved of Putin. So let's see what the former bullshitter in chief had to say.
37% of Republican voters approve of Putin. Over a third of Republican voters approve of Vladimir Putin, the former head of the KGB. Ronald Reagan would roll over in his grave.
Poor Ronald Reagan.
Wow. So I would dare say at this point, undoubtedly, Democrats like George W. Bush more than your average registered Republican does. I think you could say that with some certainty.
Oh, yeah. I don't think there's any question about that.
I would say at this point, they're at least running even with Republicans on approval for Reagan, and they might actually be topping Republicans on approval for Reagan. They've been wrapping themselves in the ghost of Ronald Reagan for quite some time, as you can see. So it wasn't just Slotkin. Where's the leftist, the real left anti-liberal resistance? Oh, well, not so opposed to this take. Here's our very own sellout, Bernie Sanders. For 250 years, the United States has supported democracy.
Oh, yeah.
Now, in the middle of a horrific war that Putin started, Trump is turning his back on Ukraine and democracy, all to the benefit of a brutal dictator in Moscow. Now, the reader notes was really what made news here, aside from the fact that he's such a disgusting sellout. Bernie Sanders in 2019, quote, the U.S. overthrew the government of Guatemala, a democratically elected government, overthrew the government of Brazil. I actually agreed with Trump, one of the very few times I did, in terms of his willingness to sit down with Kim Jong-un. Remember that, Bernie?
Wow.
Remember that guy? Wow. Wow. This is the one that really made the rounds. Reader's note. Even under Obama in 2015, the United States was providing weapons and or military training to 73% of the world's dictatorships as classified by Freedom House. The U.S. is the #1 supporter of dictatorships in the world. And this is what is so tragic about Bernie Sanders. A lot of these Congress people are dumb as a bag of hammers. You can safely say a lot of them literally don't know that. Bernie Sanders certainly knows that. And that is what is so disgusting about him pumping up this war. I don't even understand his motivation for it at this point. He has no movement. He has no political leverage. He's not running for president again. All I can think is this is what's keeping Jane out of jail for her dodgy accounting at that college. Like, I don't get why he's doing this.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is certainly a mystery on that score. I mean, who the hell knows? And who cares? Like,
Right.
there's a lot of questions that people torture themselves with. Well, what could it be? Was AOC recruited by the
Yeah.
CIA or did she sell out? Who cares? What matters is what they do. And at this
I,
point, he's just absolutely useless. And as for Slotkin's response there, yeah, I mean, this is just the end result of this shift. I won't even necessarily say towards the right, although that is, I guess, true kind of for the Democrats. Although they were always, they're always a pro-war party. They supported George Bush at first when he decided to invade Iraq. But they definitely, the way to describe the Democrats is they're always chasing the polls, right? Which is a lot of why they have trouble, winning and maintaining power. Bill Clinton even, operated like this. I forget who said this about Bill Clinton, but one of these writers said, he always acted as though most of the country disagreed with him, right? He always acted as though most of the country wanted to stay Republican. And so he had to kind of trick people into voting Democrat by triangulating and adopting a lot of Republican policies. And the Democrats have never really broken that habit. That's why in 2016, the commentators, I remember an MSNBC panel say, this could have been Ronald Reagan's convention. Because they think that's where the country wants them to go, but it's not. They're always chasing it. They're always behind. They're always 10 steps behind. The country had moved on from that. That's why Trump won. And now, obviously, if you look at the polls, the country has moved on from this specific brand of neocon Reaganism, which they're trying to sell here. Slotkin is considered a rising star within the party. She's only 48 years old. This is why they chose her. She's from a swing state, right? So, this is a good indication not only of how far they've fallen, but of which direction they're heading in. You pick a rising star to give these kind of rebuttals. That's what they think of her as, and it is really a sad state of affairs.
I think they just don't even know who they are or what they stand for anymore because they're stuck. They sold themselves to Wall Street 30 years ago. There is no obvious purpose for the existence of a Wall Street owned left party. So what do? That's why they didn't even do a postmortem on this election. Jesus Christ, you prosecuted this guy for spitting on the sidewalk. You prosecuted him for everything you could prosecute him for, and he got returned to office, only the second person to serve non-consecutive terms.
Right.
And you don't do a postmortem? No, they have just doubled down because they cannot reform without basically getting rid of everybody.
Right.
There's nobody in this party who's not complicit at this point in selling the party to Wall Street and the war machine, even as we see Bernie Sanders sitting there and pumping up this war, and again, there's no way he doesn't know better. There's no way he doesn't know that we started this war, that Putin did it. The kindest possible interpretation, given that Ralph Nader here as well. Now, you want to talk about Cold War kids. I don't know what she means by that. She would have been a child during the Reagan years. These are real Cold War kids, Bernie Sanders and Ralph Nader. And what you really
they're
see
before Cold War kids. I mean, they're
Cold War.
They're Cold
well,
War.
no, not really. I mean, they're a product of the Cold War. They would have been.
That's true.
You know,
that's true. Yeah.
Literally Cold War kids.
Yeah. When I think of Cold War kids, I think like your generation.
Well, that was part two. That was like
that was later on. Yeah, that was toward the revolution.
That was the Empire Strikes Back.
Right.
The Republican president of the United States has fully backed the communist dictatorship of Russia. Again, what the fuck are you talking about?
I mean, he's lost it. This guy's lost it. What is he, 90 years old? I mean, he's
Vladimir Putin started out as an operative in the Soviet Union's version of the CIA and rose to become the unchallenged dictator after its dissolution. What do you think the Republicans of the 1970s, 80s, and 90s would have thought about that turnaround? Oh, you mean the ones who wanted to, like, literally crucify you? Literally, those Republicans? Right. That's who you're referring to as the arbiters of foreign policy? Even today, the Republicans accuse some Democrats of being commie libs. Well, even now, old dinosaurs like you accuse actual leftists of being commies, apparently. This is big time, no holds barred support for Vladimir Putin by a Republican. Interesting to see how this plays out in the shocked and stunned ranks of the grand old party. Or should we call it the grand old plutocrats supporting the old line communists? That is so unintelligible. That is so ignorant. It's hard to believe that this man who's been around for as long as he has certainly knows a thing or two. It's amazing that he put that out there. Amazing.
Yeah. I mean, he's lost. What is he, 91? Yeah, I think he's
somebody take Ralph's phone away.
Yeah, exactly. He should probably stick to the Wordle at this point.
But this is why, you see people talking about how we reform the Dems. Yeah, it's not reformable.
No.
It's not reformable. I'm not going to sit here and tell you, yeah, no, you know what? Workers strike back. That's easy. We're going to organize Amazon overnight. It's just the only thing that makes any sense.
Right.
Like, if you're going to be politically engaged, building outside power is the only thing that makes sense, because this party is not reformable. It just keeps getting worse.
Right. I mean, this is just the ratchet effect, which you're seeing take place exactly as everybody warned it would, where the Democrats move to the right, and that only pushes the Republicans to the right. And there's no question that this continues in this way in terms of the electoral space, because what do you have now? This is what the Democrats are going to run with in 2026. If I had to bet, I'd say they're probably going to win the House decently by now. I mean, 2 years is an eternity in politics, but writing is already on the wall, right? I mean, that timeline is already, like, step one, angry people at town halls. We're seeing that in spades earlier than expected. So given the Republicans' majority is very slim, given that, they are well on the way to causing a lot of economic pain. We're a week away from a government shutdown plus tariffs, by the way. There's no sign of any progress on a budget deal. We'll get to that later. I think the Republicans are going to blow it bad enough where the Democrats will come back into power. And then what will happen? Things will get even worse, and then the Republicans will go even further to the right, and then they'll take power again. And then the Democrats will scooch over to the right, and they'll take power again, because the Republicans will fuck it up, and that'll push the Republicans further. That's called the ratchet effect. It just goes one way the wrong way. That's the only way this goes. And the only way to interrupt that is to shut the system down and force a reset, and that's where labor militancy comes in. As you said, it's not the easy thing. It's the only play there is.
Right. There is no other play.
Right.
The people who pay for the Democrats, this is the dirty secret. They like what Trump is doing. They are very happy to see him stuff more money into the pockets of corporations and plutocrats. When the Democrats get in, they're going to make some empty gestural motions toward undoing it, and they're going to blame the GOP and whoever the rotating villain is at that time, maybe Fetterman, who won't vote for the bill.
Right. Exactly. Yes. Yep. That is exactly the playbook, and no clearer example of that in action than what we just saw.
Please clap.